Hi investigators, Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy with the rearranged office, and this week we have been looking at issues around fraud in Victoria in relation to the licensing of private investigators. We've looked at the issues of billing fraud, and we've looked at the issues of people attacking staff in the investigation agency who are only doing their job. And we went right deep into that, what seems to be a really easy job. We received some correspondence, confirmed that you're going to complete those instructions in 14 days, and then send out some correspondence. We found out that it was much, much more complicated than that in the assumptions about how easy life is for ladies and gentlemen in the administration role for private investigators. And we actually discovered the amazing fact that the office administration team in the investigation agency are the engine room of the investigation industry in Australia. So we come now to part 3. We've looked at the documents and billing. We've looked at the attacks on the agency staff members, and today we're looking at the licensing authority. We're going to go deep into the Victorian Licensing Regulation Division, but what I say here really applies to most licensing authorities around Australia. I mean, all they've got to do, it's not hard, is receive your application, give you a license, and basically monitor what's going on. That's all. That's not difficult. Just like the office admin team in the investigation agency. Well, no, it's not. It's a completely thankless role undertaken by people often on light duties who don't want to be there in that role, and they have to professionally deal with what happens inside the regulatory authority. Now, just because you get a security guard's license or a private investigator's license, it doesn't mean that the regulatory authority is there to resolve your personal issues in your career. They're not going to fill in the form for you when you ring them up. They're not going to do your dirty work for you. Why do you assume that the licensing authority is going to mediate the trouble you start? Don't start trouble, you won't have a problem. They're not going to get you the $4.50 you were underpaid in that role 2 years ago. No, they're not going to do that. They are not, on your behalf, going to eliminate all your competitors in your industry in Ballarat. No, they're not going to do that. I'm sorry. That's not their role. They're not going to prioritise your industrial relations issue in your workplace. It's none of their business. Just because everybody there has to have a security guard licence or a PI licence, industrial relations are not the regulator's role in Victoria. They're not the regulator's role in Queensland. They're not the regulator's role in South Australia, Western Australia, New South Wales, or anywhere else. They're not going to give you what you want when you demand it. Sorry, not going to happen. They're not going to believe your lies. They're not going to get even with your employer. And in Victoria alone, where there's, I'll tell you on Friday at Spy Curious exactly how many private investigators there are, and there's over 20,000 security guards. And if you ring up the regulatory authority down there expecting them to resolve your issues, it's not going to happen. So this week, we've had a hatchet job done by a Facebook hate group on an investigation agency. Well, I don't know whether it's right or wrong. I don't really care. All I do know is it's not trial by Facebook. And the regulatory authority is not going to do that either. And it doesn't matter how many packets of tissues you have and how often you contact them and grizzle about the injustice that's happened in your industry. They don't care. They have their allocated work to do. And it's not to represent you and get rid of your competitors. So what do they do? In Victoria, the Licensing Regulation Authority enforce the Private Security Act 2004. You studied this in your private investigator course. Now, it's a very simple document. Here it is. So it's Private Security Act 2004. Might be backwards on your screen. And if there's an issue that's going to arise in licensing in Victoria, it's addressed in the 149 pages of this document since 2004. Prior to that, there was the 1968 Act that they had. That wasn't the name of it, but that was the year. And I don't really care. We're in 2022, so that's irrelevant. We've got the Act from 2004 that regulates private investigations in Victoria today. What does that mean? That means that that Act was presented for assent and was approved. So basically, the Attorney General went to Buckingham Palace and he said to the Queen, "G'day, Your Majesty, I've got this bill here, can you give it assent?" And she's looked at it. Yes, would you like cucumber sandwiches and a cup of tea, Attorney General? Yes, I agree to all that. And she nods her head and it gets royal assent. That's how it works. So the Act can now be enforced in Victoria. Who is in charge of that Act? Is it the people you're grizzling to when you ring up or email or contact the Licensing Regulation Division, who you expect to do your bidding and dirty work for you? No, it isn't them. The person in charge of this Act is the Chief Commissioner of Police. Now, you do not want the attention of the Chief Commissioner of Police under any circumstances. I recently had that attention myself, and it was in accordance with the Act. And basically, I'll show you what the attention was. The Chief Commissioner issued my private investigator licence. There it is. Thanks, Chief Commissioner. Really appreciate that. Yes, I've got shiny suit shoes and I know how to salute. So he's issued my private investigator licence in accordance with this Act. And he's issued you yours as well. Thank you, Chief Commissioner. And one day it might be a she. I think currently it's a he. So what is the purpose of the Act? Is it to get you the $4.50 you were underpaid 3 years ago? Is it to get even with your past employer? What's the purpose of the Act? Neither of the previous two. The purpose of this Act is to provide for the licensing and registration of certain participants in the private security industry. So that's security guards, private investigators, that sort of thing. And to otherwise regulate the private security industry for the purpose of ensuring public safety and peace. Your bullshit with your competition or people you don't like, if you're a member of a surveillance hate group on Facebook, is not the Licensing Regulation Division's problem where you want to create war. They're about creating peace. There it is. To otherwise regulate the private security industry for the purposes of ensuring safety and peace. Safety to who? The people at the Licensing Regulation Division who you grizzle about, say they didn't help you with your problem, who are useless and do nothing, are sensitive human beings just doing their job. That's what they are. They have feelings just like you do. Abusing them, publicly stating that they don't do their job properly, will get you nowhere. In fact, it could be a risk to the safety of the person you're attacking, which is unacceptable from workplace health and safety point of view in 2022. So before you start carrying on like a goose, think about what you're doing and who you're trying to push around. The Chief Commissioner is responsible for that, not the person answering the telephone. So what does the Act contain? It contains 149 pages of rules that can be referred to by investigators or security guards in relation to their career and their work. So say you go and join a Facebook hate group for surveillance operatives, which is a sewing circle, and the group gets all wound up over Mike Evans and starts attacking him, and people post comments and whatever, and basically that starts to happen and you get all excited, you've just joined and you weigh in on it and all that sort of thing. That's exactly what they want you to do. So Mike Evans thinks, oh God, I've had a gutful of this Facebook group. I'm going to go and complain to the Licensing Regulation Division. In that document, they have complaints, how they investigate complaints. You can Google this and you can download it and you can read all 149 pages of it. You can see the power of the Chief Commissioner to hold a disciplinary inquiry. You can see the interim suspension of registration or authority notice to a registration holder is the subject of a disciplinary inquiry. You can get a further notice to oral submissions. You'll have all the procedures that are there on page 86 and the powers of the Chief Commissioner at a disciplinary inquiry. What are the Chief Commissioner's powers? As far as your career goes, these are God-like powers. The Ayatollah in Iran hasn't got the power that this person has. This person can wipe your license and wipe your income according to the stupid way you acted. Now, they don't generally do that. In 2014, it's last information we have, they only took away 21 licenses off private investigators. I think you'll see in future coming months, due to events, there'll be a large number being taken away, but it's not very common that much is taken away. So we looked at disciplinary proceedings. Now, they're not there to come and kick the door down of your competitors like you want them to. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do a big dramatic search and seizure in front of the neighbours like you want. It isn't going to happen. They like to stay in touch. They like to tell you what they're doing. They're very good at it. They attend industry association meetings. They give out newsletters. This is in Victoria. And they communicate with you and let you know. Just last week, I had an email from them and it was talking to everybody in the industry. I think it was about firearms or something like that. Now, I'm not a licensed firearms security guard, but for those who were, it was important. So we've got 149 pages of an act that they refer to and look at. Now, you think your issue is the most important one on planet Earth because you got wound up in a hate group. And you got sucked in to what they're all saying and what they're doing. This is the 2004 Act they're enforcing, and they're not stupid. They were not born yesterday. They keep statistics, and they share the statistics with the industry. Let's have a look at some of those statistics. 93% of complaints to the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division come from direct competitors. Now, I told you earlier this week there was no complaints about licensed private investigators in relation to their work. Well, there isn't. This is competitors complaining about their competition and expecting the Licensing Regulation Division to do a hatchet job and eliminate them. Now, that stops at competitor number 6 or number 15. Where does it stop? The Victorian Licensing Regulation Division are not there to give you dominance of the market in the industry. They're not going to do that. So they know statistically from their work, from the complaints they receive, this isn't about how good the work is or how bad the work is. It's a common factor that they complain about each other. Now, that's the same with real estate agents, jockeys, retailers, everything like that. But the Licensing Regulation Division does not deal with those people. So that's complaints about the investigators by the industry. What else do they share down there with you? Well, there's complaints by members of the public. 80% of public complaints to the Licensing Regulation Division come from domestic vulnerable clients. What does that mean? That means those that have been put under surveillance for coercive control, who are women with children and living by themselves, and the surveillance operative gone in and followed them around and put a tracker on their vehicle or whatever they've done, and they've been found out, the Victorian Police know that 80% of those public complaints come from domestic, vulnerable clients. Now, part of this issue this week has been attacking investigation office admin staff who are female. Those domestic vulnerable clients there, I would say 99% of them would be female. When at the same meetings this information is shared, the VWA and the LRD are there together, and there's no complaints from the Victorian Work Cover Authority going to the Licensing Regulation Division, as I said earlier this week. The complaints are all competitors complaining about each other or vulnerable domestic clients who are put under surveillance for coercive control. Something to think about there, isn't it? If you're perfect and you want your competition eliminated, and that's done by the Licensing Regulation Authority, they've got a pretty good insight into what you're all about. Now, that does not mean that it's all bad. Like I say, they go to those meetings, they look at it, and they present their statistics and their information. So let's have a look at what is fraud in Victoria. Victoria, let's just have a look at it. So fraud in Victoria includes a number of offences which involve deception, including the offence of obtaining property by deception. So it's covered in the Crimes Act, as you can see there. It requires an intention to permanently deprive the rightful owner of the property. Now, that property may include money, it may include land, it may include furniture or whatever. So that's the definition in Victoria. They're always looking at deception. If you want the police to cooperate with your fraud investigation in Victoria, as soon as you say by deception, they're the two key words. You suddenly have got their interest and you've got their cooperation. If you don't say by deception, they'll go, no, we're too busy, we've got terrorists, we've got domestic violence, we're not interested in that. But you say to them, yes, officer, but it's by deception, they're going to get a promotion if they go through and prosecute that successfully. And that's what every police officer, they all want to become lieutenant or general or whatever police officers become, I don't know. The term property is given a wide meaning under Section 71 of the Crimes Act, includes all real and personal property and specifically includes money and intangible property. What the hell is intangible property? Well, it might be shares, it could be investments, intellectual property, it could be goodwill. So all of those things are property. So they could be included. It's a very wide meaning. Two things you've got to get used to as an investigator in civil investigations is the wide meaning of property. Okay, it's not just a house. It's not just a skyscraper. It can be goodwill, intellectual property, a trademark, which if you've been watching this program regularly, you see I've had my trademark almost flogged by a bunch of cowboys in America. They called their program PI Curious. My trademark program you're watching now is called Spy Curious. So that's intangible property and property. All right. If you have a case of fraud in Victoria, the police are very busy. They've got terrorism to deal with. They've got domestic violence to deal with. They've got COVID-19 issues to deal with. They've got general order to deal with. Keep in mind, the whole purpose of this act isn't that to maintain the peace, all right? They're not interested in your law and they are not interested in doing your dirty work for you. Do not be sucked in by a surveillance hate group. Surveillance hate groups evolved from the original surveillance sewing circles before they had Facebook. It was just a telephone chat between a bunch of gossipy guys running crap on other investigators and other investigation agencies and injustices. I mean, they sit around for 7.5 hours every day. They want someone to talk to. They get bored. So they get on the phone and start a bit of trouble. Like I said, they're gossipy guys in a sewing circle. Originally, that's all it was. Then it evolved into a hate group. The basic idea behind the hate group, evolving from the sewing circle, is to wind everybody up over emotional issues such as investigation training, licensing, lack of enforcement by the LRD on your competition, workplace health and safety, and twisting it around to making it sound problematic, a big issue for beginners in the industry, so that beginners will weigh in on it and blindly go along with it while these guys keep their distance. They shout loudly, they sound almost believable, and they get easily led members to do their dirty work and abandon them when exposed. Now, does that sound like a bikie recruitment thing? Yep, sure is very similar. They get on there, they're not very political correct, they say stuff that isn't true, and people who don't know get caught up in the emotion and the excitement and generally weigh in. The big issue is with it for your career, if you're an emerging investigator, is when you follow the instructions from your hate group and you give them their loyalty, and your loyalty becomes more important than your professional integrity, they have systematically wiped you out of the industry because nobody's going to employ you because they monitor these things to see who's saying what. And they don't want you working for them. The employers don't want you working for them if you're going to be a participant in a hate group. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't investigators out there that do the wrong thing or have done the wrong thing. In Queensland, there was an investigator who got 2 police officers, one was his sister, one was his brother-in-law, to access a database so he could locate people he was doing surveillance on. They both had their careers destroyed. They lost their jobs as police officers, and basically the magistrate wasn't having it, saying it was the thin edge of the wedge. Database access is the number one, illegal database access is the number one reason public servants lose their job in Australia. And that's an example of a private investigator in Queensland. So if something like that happens in Victoria, the reference point is the Private Security Act with 109 pages of areas that they can address in relation to it. Now, if something's not there, well, it'll be in the Crimes Act 1958, but we're not looking at that today. We're just looking at people trying to coercively get the licensing authority to do their dirty work for them. The licensing authority is not there for that. The people that answer the telephone, respond to the emails and the correspondence in the Licensing Regulation Division quite often are providing solutions. They're saying, well, go to the Fair Work Commission. Okay, take that issue up with fair trading. Go to church for Christ's sake. Lighten up, mate. I don't think they probably say the last two, but they are helpful. There is no need to abuse them. There is no need to say, you're not doing your job properly. You didn't get rid of my competitors for me like I wanted you to. Hang on. That's just so sad. New South Wales Licensing Authority aren't going to do your dirty work for you. No. Queensland, fair trading, they're not going to do your dirty work for you. Western Australia Police, Security Enforcement Division, they're not going to do your dirty work for you. Have no high expectation that a licensing authority is there to do that for you. They're not. Okay? I hope that's very clear. Leave the people in the office doing their job alone. Don't single out the Licensing Regulation Division of Victoria for not doing their job because you're a snowflake. Won't happen. Thanks for watching. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. Hope you have a good week. I'll see you on Spy Curious, 2 p.m. on Friday.